Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are jumping into a really fascinating body of sources. It's all centered on a text called Gallus Gallus and the Crepuscular Ecotone.
It is. And it reads, less like a history and more like a work of applied ecology.
Exactly. We're looking at something the author calls the First Secession.
Right. And it's not the kind of revolutionary story we're used to.
Yeah.
Well, it's profoundly subtle. There are no banners, no dramatic rebellion.
None of that. When you hear a word like secession or revolution, you immediately think of, noise, conflict, some kind of direct confrontation. But this text, it's describing a separation that was almost entirely ecological and psychological.
A quiet refusal. That's the phrase that sticks with me. A quiet refusal to keep doing things that just don't work anymore.
A gentle withdrawal from a system that had become, well, dysfunctional.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We want to really unpack the mechanics of that transition for you. We're going to track the shift from the very engineered control of a place they call the farm.
Which is built on this brittle consistency.
Brittle, exactly. From that to the resilient variation they find in the red dirt.
Ashley County.
And we really want to show how the environment itself, the physical world, steps in and becomes the new law, a functional law for the Gallus.
The Queen Cinnamons.
That's right.
And I think that distinction you just made between engineered law and ecological law, that's really the key to understanding this entire story.
Absolutely. The text sets that up right away. Secession here wasn't about conquest. It wasn't a war.
It was about order.
Yes. The author says the significance is entirely in the order of their actions. Not what they look like, but the sequence.
Moving, waiting, resting, returning.
It's all about separating from, and the text is very specific here, unnecessary pressure. And that pressure was coming from the farm system of endless repetition.
Repetition without context.
Exactly. They were doing the things, eating, sleeping, but it was totally divorced from the reality of the outside world.
Which, I think, brings us to the core analogy that's woven through these early chapters. It's this idea that systems based on repetition and fit,
yes,
they will always outperform systems built on ambition and permanence.
That's the framework. I mean, if you need a mental model for this whole thing, it's the machine versus the forest.
Okay, break that down.
Well, the machine is, it's tightly tuned. It's designed for perfect efficiency at one task. But if a single gear slips, if one input is just slightly off,
The whole thing grinds to a halt.
total halt, and it needs an external mechanic to come in and fix it. It can't fix itself.
But the forest.
The forest is the opposite. It thrives on what a machine would call its failures.
Yeah.
A fallen tree, uneven soil, leaves breaking down.
Shifting shadows.
Right. All of that is what allows it to absorb shock, to distribute load, and just keep growing. It doesn't need a mechanic.
Because it fits. It fits the landscape it's in. It doesn't try to flatten the terrain. It yields to it. It grows around it.
That's it. That is the contextual fit the Gallus had to learn, and that's the learning process we're going to trace today.
So let's start there with that philosophy, because it really does set the stage for everything that follows. The text makes this very pointed claim right at the start.
It does. It says that any structure, whether it's biological or, human, that tries to enforce permanence, it just has a demonstrably poor track record.
And the farm is the perfect case study for that. It wasn't just a place. It was an ideology of permanence.
Yes, it operated on rules designed to eliminate all the variables: time, weather, pathogens, predators.
It treated them like externalities, things to be controlled.
Or compensated for. It completely ignored the fact that those are the conditions of existence. You can't just wish them away.
So the system that actually survives, the red dirt system, it works precisely because it doesn't try to last forever, not through these rigid, unyielding structures anyway.
It survives through repetition. But it's a different kind of repetition. Daily, seasonal, even geological cycles of behavior that have proven to be functional.
There's that great line, repetition, when aligned with reality, outperforms ambition. So let's talk about the farm's ambition. What did that look like?
In the farm's case, ambition was the goal of constant, uniform output. That's it. Produce more consistently, no matter the cost or the context, but the text adds that critical little clause right after.
That the repetition only works if it's aligned with here.
Exactly. The system worked here because it fit here.
So it's not a universal solution. You couldn't take the behaviors the Gallus learned in the red dirt, the way they hold their bodies when they forage, and just drop them into a different environment like a marsh or a mountain.
It would fail instantly. The fit is not transferable. Survival is intensely regional. It's contextual. It demands this deep, almost unconscious environmental literacy.
And the farm's biggest mistake was assuming its rules were universal.
Yes, that its design just needed better enforcement, stronger controls.
And speaking of failure, the way the prologue describes the farm's collapse is so scary, isn't it? It didn't end with a bang. No. The whole thing didn't fall apart all at once. The language, the metrics of productivity, they all stayed intact even as the meaning just drained away for the animals inside.
It was a failure of relevance, not a failure of structure. That's a huge distinction.
So everything still worked.
As designed. Feed arrived, perfectly standardized, the gates closed right on time, the lights toggled on the timer. And that was the terrifying part, the realization that the design itself was the problem.
Because it had optimized itself into irrelevance.
Exactly. It was no longer relevant to the internal survival logic of the animals.
So the birds didn't leave because of some violent collapse. They left because they found the constant low-level stress of that predictability.
Yeah.
Which is unbearable.
They were offered compensation. The text calls it fragile. And they left for the dirt, which offered honesty.
Okay, let's unpack that. Compensation versus honesty. What does that mean here?
Well, compensation in the farm was, say, scheduled chemically enhanced feed. It addresses the symptom hunger, but it never provides the varied texture or the challenge of the search that they need for their psychological health.
So it's a trade-off. Security in exchange for total dependence.
It is. The dirt, on the other hand, it's honest. There are no guarantees, no scheduled deliveries. But there's also no deception. If you're hungry right now. If a predator is near, that information is immediate.
So leaving wasn't a heroic escape, it was a relief.
A relief. They were just seeking a state where their actions produced, commensurate results.
Yeah.
Without that buffering layer of human management in between.
And that relief, that's what starts the shift in governance.
It is. Inside the farm, you have instruction. A manager telling you what to do. Outside, the world just responds. Immediately. No commentary.
Move too slow, you starve. You move too fast, you waste precious energy.
It's the move from instruction to this immediate, non-judgmental feedback. That's the beginning of their sovereignty.
And it's amazing how quickly small errors just self-correct.
The environment is a ruthless editor, but a very efficient one.
Right.
A small failure, a nest in the wrong spot, a poorly timed search for food. It either results in death or it results in an immediate physical consequence. Hunger, exposure, something that reinforces the correct behavior faster than any authority ever could.
So the behaviors that emerged, the posture, the timing, they weren't invented.
They were permitted by the land. The land made them possible. They stopped asking if they were allowed to do what worked.
The farm always had an answer for allowed by whom.
Yes, but the land only answered when.
And that circles us back to that foundational idea that survival doesn't require dominating the world.
It only requires correct placement within it.
They didn't conquer the red dirt.
Not at all. They just found the specific geometry, the timing, the posture, the fit that allowed them to exist without constantly fighting that unnecessary pressure. That's the First Secession. Efficiency through fit.
Okay, so let's dig into the physical reality of that new law. The red dirt itself. Because to understand the Gallus, you have to understand the geology of Ashley County, Arkansas. The first law they obeyed wasn't spoken. It was literally inhaled.
And absorbed. Yeah, we're talking about a process called ladderization.
Ladderization.
It's defined in the first couple of chapters, and it's not just about soil. It's a deep geological argument between water and stone. The text calls it creation by subtraction.
Okay, so how does that work? What does this subtraction leave behind that's so important?
Well, laterization is a pretty brutal process. You find it in places with high rainfall, like this region. The rain is acidic, it's persistent, and it washes away anything soft and easily soluble.
So things like silica, a lot of the quick-release nutrients you'd find in fertile soil.
Exactly. It strips the land down to its absolute resilient core.
And what's left behind?
A dense, mineral, iron-rich skeleton, mostly aluminum and iron oxides. They're incredibly resistant to weathering. And this clay that's left, sometimes it's called a hardpan, it is not the fertile organic topsoil the farm relied on.
So it's not good soil in the traditional sense.
For high-yield agriculture, no. It promises persistence. It's not going to wash away. But it does not promise an effortless yield. The land has thinned itself down to only what can endure.
And that inherent persistence in the geology that immediately started to inform the bodies of the Gallus. Their coloring was already there, the cinnamon, the rust. But the alignment with the dirt was transformative.
It became critical, and this is where the text does something beautiful. It redefines camouflage. It's not disguise.
It's agreement.
It is agreement. When the queens settled down low against that laterite clay, their bodies just blurred. The edges dissolved into the landscape.
Whereas the farm wanted safety through sameness. Uniform walls, uniform floors.
But the dirt rejects uniformity. It demands you fit into its irregularity, and you hold steady.
And that fit isn't just visual, right? It's chemical, too.
Deeply chemical. Let's talk about the dust bath. The farm managers thought it was unsanitary, backward.
Right.
But it was actually this incredibly sophisticated maintenance routine. It was their first medicine.
So how does the dust actually work as medicine?
The particles of iron and clay are extremely fine, and they are powerful desiccants. They absorb moisture. When the birds work this dust into their feathers down to the skin, it dries their natural oils just enough.
And that creates a hostile environment for parasites.
For external parasites like lice and mites, yes. It basically suffocates them and inhibits their breeding cycle.
So it's efficiency versus scheduled treatment.
Perfect way to put it. The dirt provided medicine without drama. It worked because its inherent chemistry happened to oppose the weakness the parasites were exploiting.
And this goes even deeper when you talk about the mineral skeleton.
It does. The iron wasn't just on their surface. Trace amounts were incorporated into the structure of their feathers as they grew, and that added mineral weight became crucial for sensing their environment.
This is the part that I found just incredible. The text talks about how they learned to settle low, to press their breast and wing feathers against the earth. Why was that physical contact so vital?
It's about vibration. That laterite clay is compacted and dense because of the rain and the iron. Vibration travels so much faster and with greater clarity through that compacted clay than it does through, say, leaf litter or the farm's artificial bedding.
So it's like the ground becomes an amplifier.
A massive one. A distant footstep, a subtle movement, it's transmitted through the ground, up the iron-impregnated feather shafts, and directly into their bone structure and inner ear.
The feathers become seismic sensors.
They become antennae. The farm, with its insulated, sound-dampening surfaces, it had cut them off from that entire data stream. It replaced it with a loud, intermittent, artificial alarm. The dirt taught them that silence is data if you know how to listen with your body.
And then there's the visual aspect, the iron oxide.
Right. It dulls the feathers to this matte red-brown finish. And the text makes this great point. Shine attracts, matte absorbs.
A glossy feather reflects light. It announces your location, your health.
But a matte surface absorbs light. It blurs your definition, softens your edges. The queens learned to distrust gloss, a lesson that came straight from the geology.
And it wasn't just sight, it was scent too, right?
Yeah, the clay particles bind to volatile scent molecules. So the birds started to smell subtly like the ground, like minerals, not like prey. It confused hunters that relied on these clean, organic categories to find food.
It's total integration then. From their internal sense of warning to their external color and even their smell, the law was literally written into the mineral structure of the land.
They weren't just living on the land anymore. They were a dynamic extension of its geology.
Okay, so if the red dirt succeeds, because it demands this variability and constant feedback, let's circle back to the farm. Chapter 4 gives us this perfect cautionary tale. The system wasn't destroyed by a catastrophe. It was undone by precision.
By its own precision, yes, and that's because it mistook consistency for stability.
And those are very different things.
Completely different. Consistency is uniform input. Stability is the ability to absorb shock, to integrate unexpected events.
So the farm enforced consistency by, as the text says, flattening time.
Right. Light didn't slope gradually from dawn to dusk. It was toggled on, off, no context for clouds or seasons. The feed was perfectly uniform, delivered on a fixed schedule, which ignored the fact that their caloric needs change with the temperature or how much they're moving.
And this postpones immediate danger, sure, but it completely eliminates the learning cycle they need to actually survive.
You get what the text calls stress without context. This underlying constant anxiety because there's no natural rhythm. They feel the need for rest, but it's not the deep restoration that comes from earning that rest in alignment with the world.
And when the system saw them adapting to this,
it doubled down. Control breeds dependency. If the birds started to shift their patterns, the farm's response was to tighten the cycles or increase the chemical inputs. It created a system where they were completely dependent on external management for their basic survival.
so the fragility was engineered right into the system.
It was. A failure to tolerate a single unexpected variable because all the internal buffers, the ability to deal with a little hunger or varying light, had been deliberately bred out of them.
And this leads directly to the language mismatch from Chapter 10.
Yes, the farm spoke a binary language.
Yeah.
Lights on, lights off. Gates open, gates closed. Alarms on, alarms off.
It's simple. It's clear.
It's simple and clear, but it replaced the subtle complexity of the environment with the blunt certainty of management.
It's like a digital clock versus a sundial. The clock is precise, but it tells you nothing about the weather, the season.
The position of the sun, exactly. The farm offered certainty without any context.
And safety without feedback. That becomes indistinguishable from a constant threat.
Because your body has no information to calibrate its stress response, the farm would shout with alarms demanding your full, exhausting attention to every binary crisis.
Whereas the dirt, the language of the soil, is continuous.
It's continuous. It speaks through pressure and release, through temperature, moisture, resistance. Every single step on that red dirt is a sentence.
And the author calls this fluency without literacy.
I love that phrase. Your feet learn the language of the ground faster than your mind can ever learn the binary logic of the farm. The dirt whispers constantly. But that nuance saves energy. It doesn't cost it.
Okay, let's pause on that. Why is constant low-level information less stressful than a loud intermittent alarm?
Because stress, at its core, comes from surprise, not from information. If the environment is constantly informing you about these tiny fluctuations, pressure, moisture, you can make tiny, low-energy adjustments. You shift your weight, you tuck a feather, you move 3 feet. You adjust before it becomes a crisis.
But the farm system only signals when a condition has already crossed some artificial line. It demands a full, panicked, high-energy response every time.
That's it. So the farm promised certainty, and what it delivered was fragility. The dirt only promised probability, a high chance of survival if you pay attention, and it delivered resilience.
So in the end, the farm was succeeding by its own metrics.
High output, yeah.
But those metrics had just become irrelevant to the actual survival of the Gallus. The dirt just offered them a way back to compatibility. It made the farm optional.
And once management becomes optional, its control has already failed.
Right. So moving from the physical world to their internal intelligence, let's explore how the environment started to absorb the cognitive load. The text calls this environmental memory.
And this is so key to their efficiency. It's not memory like a picture in your mind. It's memory as a physical record held in the iron clay. History lives underfoot.
Stored as shape.
As shape, exactly. Compaction, heat, the texture of passage.
So how does the dirt actually store that history? Give us an example.
Well, the heavy clay holds its form. So a dry, hard-packed path that signals repeated, recent traffic. Could be human, could be a predator, potential danger.
Okay.
A soft, damp, untrodden spot that signals water accumulation and safety from heavy foot traffic. The surface texture is a direct record of past events.
And rain doesn't erase it.
Rain clarifies it. It reveals the contours. It softens edges in predictable ways.
Which is the total opposite of the farm. The farm tried to erase history every day. Clean the surfaces, reset to baseline.
And the result of that is that every moment carries the full weight of uncertainty. You have to expend enormous energy reassessing a perpetually blank slate.
But the dirt accumulates and stores stability. And that allows for what the text calls outsourced cognition.
A powerful idea. Cognition outsourced to the environment is efficiency.
So how does that work for the queens in practice?
They learn to rely on familiar, inherited places. A dust bath depression that has consistently proven safe. A specific clump of scrub that offers reliable cover. A path they know is solid.
So they don't have to think about it every time.
Exactly. They trust the soil's memory. And that frees up their central processing. Their attention isn't wasted on constantly assessing the ground's safety. It's freed up for scanning and timing, the high-priority survival tasks.
The body doesn't have to carry the memory stability. The soil does it for them.
It does. And that outsourced intelligence leads right into the discipline of stillness, the camouflage doctrine in Chapter 6.
We said camouflage is agreement, fitting the language of the ground. But the discipline is the active part.
It is. Stillness by itself isn't enough. If you're perfectly still on a flat, glossy surface, you're a target.
So timing is camouflage's spine.
Yes. It's about synchronizing your movement with the environment, moving in a way that just dissolves into the shifting shadows and textures of the land.
They learn the ambient signature of each place.
Yes, that low, irregular chorus of insects, wind, distant water, it's the background noise. Stillness allows them to reduce their own signature until it drops below that ambient threshold.
Which buys them time.
Buys them crucial time. It allows for a selective response, not a panicked one.
And this all culminates in what I think is the most stunning adaptation in the entire book. The split eye, chapter 23. The 142 queens become one distributed sensor array.
It's mass lateralization of vision. It's an evolutionary masterstroke for minimizing decision latency.
So the two eyes are doing different jobs.
Functionally and neurologically specialized to perform parallel processing. Yes.
Okay, let's break that down. We're talking about brain hemispheres here.
We are. The left eye, controlled by the right hemisphere of the brain, scans outward. Wide field of view. The right hemisphere is specialized for novelty and high-speed threat detection.
Its only job is vigilance.
Its only job is to ask one question. Is this new? Is this a danger? It doesn't analyze value. It only flags deviation from the baseline.
And the right eye.
The right eye is controlled by the left hemisphere. It's focused downward, narrow, precise. The left hemisphere handles detail, routine, fine motor skills.
So this eye is tuned for repetition and value.
Exactly. It's asking, is this worth taking? Is this a known texture? It's tracking seeds, tiny disturbances in the earth. It's the eye of efficiency.
The genius here is that it prevents cognitive paralysis.
It does.
Because if one mind has to assess a potential threat on the horizon and decide if a crumb is edible at the same exact time, you hesitate. And hesitation is fatal.
By splitting the task, they get parallel processing. A flash of movement picked up by the left eye can trigger a freeze state for the whole body, but it doesn't necessarily stop the right eye from noting the location of a seed.
So the group becomes this decentralized sensor array. A false alarm can localize and expire without compromising the entire group's efficiency.
It is the ultimate adaptive architecture. It's built on a foundation of trust in the environment and this incredibly sophisticated split attention.
Okay, so we have the physical systems, the cognitive systems. Let's look at the benefits for the group as a whole, and it starts with this rejection of uniformity. Chapter 8's argument. Variation is structural.
This just flies in the face of the firm's core belief that smooth, uniform surfaces are safer.
Right.
Structurally, any surface that's pressed into sameness becomes brittle. Pressure and heat and moisture, they accumulate evenly, so when failure comes, say, a sudden drought, it arrives everywhere at once. You get massive systemic cracking.
But the red dirt, because it's naturally uneven, it absorbs shock.
Unevenness distributes load. A little depression holds moisture, protecting the roots there, while a rise next to it sheds excess water. And when a threat like disease comes along, this diversity is critical.
Because variation breaks transmission.
It does. A pathogen that's adapted to one bird-specific microclimate might fail just 2 feet away, where the soil temperature and moisture is slightly different.
So this is stability through heterogeneity, not redundancy.
That's a great way to put it. The farm tried to build resilience with redundancy-identical, replaceable units. The dirt builds resilience with diversity, where no 2 units are interchangeable, but no single one is essential. The failure of one doesn't crash the whole system.
In this variable environment, it also allows for a new way of eating, the economy of scraps in Chapter 9.
Something the farm despised. Scraps were waste, inefficiency.
Proof of poor management. Everything was delivered whole, uniform. The goal was to prevent the need for searching.
But the key point is that scraps, these overlooked fragments, insects under stones, different minerals in the soil, they required effort. And they rewarded autonomy.
The very act of searching reactivated those dulled instincts.
The instincts that the farm's passive provision had suppressed. It forced them to constantly decide, is this worth taking?
So it's a shift in where value comes from. The farm believed value came from provision, from passively receiving calories.
And the dirt showed them that value emerges from discovery. An active, intentional process that sharpens your attention.
Scraps also resisted hoarding.
Right. They were inconsistent, dirty. They enforced a focus on the present moment, and they favored attention over aggression. You couldn't control or quantify them. And this is the most subtle part of the whole secession. The first scraps didn't overthrow the farm.
They just made it optional.
And once that dependence on intervention becomes optional, any real control has already failed.
Which brings us to the culmination of this whole process in Chapter 11. The moment the environment finally consents. The quiet yes of the land.
How do you measure legitimacy when there are no declarations, no witnesses?
For the Gallus, it's measured purely by fit. The test of acceptance wasn't a positive sign. It was the absence of resistance, of correction, of warning.
The dirt just stopped arguing with their presence.
Predictability became consent?
The land stopped pushing back. That's a powerful negative definition of acceptance, isn't it?
It is.
The land adjusted alongside them. It was mutual adaptation. Their low, synchronized steps stopped causing unexpected erosion. Their dust bathing actually aerated the top layer of the clay, creating little patches of fertility.
They stopped being noise in the system.
And became signal. Their presence actually improved the coherence of the local structure.
So that's the final metric. Legitimacy emerges when your presence improves coherence instead of disrupting it.
The land did not say yes with words. It said yes by not saying no. It simply permitted them to thrive. And that solidified their sovereignty through patience, attention, and knowing exactly where and when to stand.
This has been just a deep exploration of ecological sovereignty. We've traced this journey from the brittle, engineered world of the farm, where time was flat and uniformity was the law,
to a system of ecological governance, where the mineral structure of the clay provides medicine, where variation provides structural integrity.
and where cognition is literally outsourced to the ground under your feet. The entire shift for the Gallus wasn't defined by aggression. It was defined by restraint, by attention, and by that fundamental knowledge of when to stop.
And this account, though it's focused on the survival strategies of the Gallus, it really does offer a powerful reflection on our own modern condition. The farm is the system that confuses speed with survival and control with safety and noise with life. It's the system that demands we optimize every moment.
Eliminate every variable.
Exactly.
And the Queen survived not by fighting that system, but by quietly rejecting its premises. They found the hour they owned, the discipline of stillness, the wisdom of just accepting the world's honest feedback.
They didn't seek to dominate. They sought sufficiency within a very specific context.
And I think the entire text, when you boil it all down, it leaves us with this one single provocative thought.
It does. The Queens mastered time not by speeding up, but by learning exactly where to stand while time moved past them. They found their space above the flood in the dull red dirt and in the split attention of their synchronized bodies.
We've explored the physical and cognitive location of that quiet refusal for the Gallus. So the question we want to leave you with is this. What would change if you stopped trying to win against time and instead learned exactly where to stand? What is your stilt, your red dirt, and your moment of quiet refusal?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you carry the wisdom of the quiet yes forward.
Okay, let's unpack this. If you joined us for the last deep dive, we covered the Gallus's founding principles.
Yeah.
We talked about how they first learned to negotiate with the world.
Right, by physically fitting into it.
Exactly. The discipline of stillness, the red dirt, the iron in their feathers. It was all about spatial mastery. Learning how to camouflage and just belong at ground level.
And what's fascinating here, and what the source material we're looking at now, chapters 12 through 23, immediately shows us, is the limit of that. The absolute hard limit of spatial mastery.
So it worked, but only up to a point.
Precisely. They had solved the problem of where to stand during the day, where the light and the earth favored them, but they ran headlong into a much, much harder problem.
How to win.
The win. It turns out survival is, it's less about adapting to a single environment and more about adapting to a cycle of environments that shifts relentlessly. And that shift is most dangerous when the sun begins to set.
So the dirt taught them camouflage, but the clock introduced a fatal deadline.
A deadline with no extensions.
And that's our mission today. We're going to analyze this massive strategic shift. They move beyond simple concealment to achieve what the source calls temporal mastery. We're looking at the architecture of time itself.
It's a fundamental pivot.
Yeah. How did they learn to, quote, step aside at the right moment to avoid all that unnecessary pressure? And this meant achieving vertical sovereignty and ultimately developing this profound neurological adjustment called the split eye.
What's really key here is we're moving from constantly managing environmental input, that state of constant vigilance.
Right, always looking over your shoulder.
Always. And we're moving from that to establishing an absolute system, a system that operates entirely outside of those high-risk periods. It's a complete shift in philosophy.
They stop trying to outrun time.
They start respecting its constraints.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The question changes from how can we hide better to how can we make hiding completely irrelevant at the moment of highest risk?
Okay, so to really get this, we have to start where the rules of the ground begin to just completely break down.
We do. And that place is the ecotone.
The ecotone. Chapter 12 defines this perfectly, and I love this phrasing. Not as a physical location on a map, but as an argument. What does that actually mean for a place to be an argument?
It means it's a contested boundary. You have the dense forest pressing outward, trying to claim more ground, and then you have the open clearing pushing back.
It's a constant battle.
A constant, quiet battle. And because neither side ever has an absolute victory, the rules there are conditional. They're always changing. The land itself, it refuses to commit to ownership. And that refusal makes it intensely volatile for any species that demands certainty.
That idea of refusing ownership is so crucial, isn't it? It means that all those rules they learned, camouflage, stillness, which rely on predictability,
They become liabilities.
they can actually get you killed.
Exactly. And the physics of this boundary become absolutely ruthless. The source material goes into some detail here. Sound, for instance, it travels strangely. Well, one step, your sound might be absorbed by thick underbrush, totally muffled. The next step, it could reflect harshly off a patch of rock, broadcasting your position. There's no consistency.
And a vision, too.
Vision is even worse. You're constantly adjusting to the fractal nature of the shadows, the rapid shifts in light levels. It's visual noise. So ambiguity doesn't favor the cunning or the clever here.
It only favors the prepared.
Only the prepared. The source notes that the margin punished certainty, and that's a key line.
Okay, let's dig into that. The margin punished certainty. So if you felt totally sure you were safe in the ecotone,
It meant you had already failed. You failed to register the conditional nature of your safety. You've missed a crucial variable.
and we learned this margin wasn't static. It wasn't a fixed line on the ground. It breathes.
It breathes. That's a perfect word for it. The ecotone expanded at dusk. The shadows stretched outward aggressively, making the argument tilt decisively in favor of the forest.
And all of its residents.
And its residents, yes. And then it contracted at dawn. The clearing would push back. This is why safety there depended entirely on timing, not on posture, not on feather color.
The ground itself wasn't the threat.
No. The temporal change on the ground was the existential challenge, and that brings us straight into the core of that problem, the blind hour.
The blind hour, which Chapter 13 defines. And this is so much more than just sunset, isn't it?
Oh, far more. It's insidious. It's that period at dusk when the light things beyond usefulness, but it's not absolute dark yet. It's a trap.
And the sources give this really precise, almost clinical description of sensory failure.
They do. It's a sequence. Color drains first, so you can't identify things properly. A patch of red dirt looks the same as, brown leaves.
Detail follows. Everything gets a bit blurry. Features dissolve.
Right. But the most lethal aspect, the final shoe to drop, is that depth collapses last.
Okay, let's just dwell on that for a second, because that is terrifying. Depth perception. The ability to judge distance accurately. It's fundamental for everything, right? For movement, for judging a threat.
For everything. So imagine this. By the time the Gallus realize their sight is failing them, because they can no longer trust distances, they're essentially flying blind.
They've already used up the very last minutes of viable light. The gap between a safe branch and one that's too far away, it vanishes.
It vanishes. And that is why vision becomes what the source calls a borrowed sense.
Our borrowed sense, I love it.
It only works when external conditions, the light, allow it to work. And since the queens do not control the light, they lose that sense completely, precisely when they need it most.
So any guesswork is fatal.
Guesswork fails very, very quickly. And you have to consider the psychological impact. The loss of sight, it isn't like a switch flipping off. It's patchy. It's unpredictable, depending on which way you're facing or if you're under a bit of canopy.
A loss of clarity is uneven.
Terribly uneven. So trusting your eye becomes an act of danger. It might tell you safe when you're already surrounded by collapsed distance.
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting, because the philosophical weight of the sources starts to truly drive strategy. This sensory failure leads to a profound logical conclusion, and it's summarized by that line in Chapter 13. Certainty is fatal when time is thin.
Right. And what's fascinating here is what that implies. If your warning window, the time you have to react, shrinks to nothing, you can't afford to wait for confirmation.
You can't wait to be sure.
You can't. This means preparation must precede reaction. Reaction comes too late. Because by the time the sensory evidence is undeniable, by the time depth perception is gone, the decision point has already passed. You're already behind the curve.
So the blind hour punished indecision even more harshly than it punished a mistake.
Absolutely. A bird that committed early, one that moved decisively toward elevation, even if its view was imperfect, often survived. The bird that waited to be sure, did not.
And that's the real takeaway for us, isn't it? This whole transition, it exposes a hard truth. Survival wasn't going to be decided by what the queens could see at dusk, but by what they decided and did before they stopped seeing.
It's a complete shift from a responsive model of survival to a predictive, preparatory one. And think about the trade-off.
They had to sacrifice something.
They did. They had to sacrifice the last few minutes of foraging yield, which might have been valuable, for absolute, unarguable certainty of safety.
And they realized that the ground, the very thing that had offered them the gift of camouflage and stillness,
Was also the agent of their death during this temporal shift.
it demanded a new kind of accommodation, and that accommodation had to be complete. No half measures.
There was no middle path in the ecotone when the shadows began to stretch. You were either ahead of the clock or you were part of the problem.
So if the blind hour was the environment setting a trap, Chapter 14 shows us exactly why it was a biological trap. It was a perfect setup for what the sources call asymmetric warfare.
Yes, we really need to look at this biological imbalance.
Because it's not just that things get bad for the Gallus, it's that things get better for their predators.
That's the asymmetry. Nothing about the queens inherently weakens during the blind hour. Their bodies are fine, their alertness is high, but their sensor array fails them.
Their primary tool for data collection goes offline.
Right. But for the predators, the monsters in the text, the game changes completely. And the reason is biological. It's tapetum lucidum.
That's the reflective layer at the back of the eye, right? It's what gives nocturnal animals that terrifying eye shined if you catch them in a headlight.
That's the one. It's basically a biological mirror. It catches any residual light that passes through the retina without being absorbed, and it reflects it back through the retina.
So the light-sensitive cells get a second chance to catch the photon.
A second chance to absorb the light. They essentially turn tiny scraps of ambient light into usable, focused vision.
So, okay, let me get this straight. The very same forest that was flattening for the Gallus,
Where edges were dissolving and distance was becoming ambiguous.
that same physical space was actually deepening for the predators.
Precisely. Where the queen saw a confusing, two-dimensional wash of gray, the monsters gained clarity. Distance and motion began to separate cleanly from the background. Their visual system is optimized for capture in low light. The Gallus's system is optimized for finding tiny details in bright daylight.
They're built for two different worlds that just happen to occupy the same space at different times.
And the imbalance was absolute. The source is very clear on this. This wasn't about fear or malice or some cosmic injustice. It was physics. Physics enforced by biology.
Eyes built for darkness come alive, just as the day-optimized eyes begin to fail.
Yes. So the ground, which had taught the queens everything about camouflage, couldn't change the physics of their eyes. Therefore, the solution couldn't be more camouflage. It had to be a complete change in dimension.
And what happens when that asymmetry is tested? I mean, they must have learned this the hard way.
Oh, they did. Chapter 15 details the lesson of the missed dusk. And it wasn't some sudden cataclysm. It was a slow, painful realization driven by a series of small-scale, repeated failures.
So it wasn't ignorance. They knew dusk was dangerous.
It wasn't ignorance at all. The source is very clear. The first losses occurred through miscalculation and lingering. A bird would linger just a bit too long.
Just one more seed.
Exactly. Maybe the sky was clear and it looked like it promised 10 more minutes of good light. But then a sudden dampness in the air, or a high, thin cloud layer, and the margin of safety just quietly collapsed.
That line from the source is chilling. What felt like enough time was not.
And that miscalculation, often measured in just seconds, was fatal.
And these errors, they compound under time pressure, right? It's not just one bird making a mistake.
No, because one bird's misstep, the alarm call, the sudden panicked flight, it creates chaos.
Yeah.
And that chaos ripples through the entire group, causing them to make suboptimal decisions. So one loss often led to a second and a third.
And the land, it doesn't care.
The land did not intervene, but it registered the loss. The source describes these little signs: a scuffed patch of dirt, a small dragged arc in the soil where something was taken.
So memory formed where warning could not.
Yeah, a very powerful and very painful feedback loop, unsoftened by nature. And it powerfully reinforced this new temporal mandate. They learned that the ground, despite all its bounty during the day, became utterly lethally unreliable at a specific hour. It forced them to distinguish, absolutely and without compromise, between their day strategy and their night strategy.
Which brings us to the ultimate behavioral mandate. This is in Chapter 16. It's distilled into the most efficient rule possible, the binary rule.
It's stark. I mean, it's brutally simple. If you are still on the ground, you're already late.
Wow. Not you might be late or it's getting late. You are already late.
The elegance of it is in that simplicity. Survival was no longer dependent on being the most clever or the fastest bird on the ground. Competence, your skill, it literally expires at dusk.
So all that expertise you've built up for foraging, for hiding, it's worth nothing after a certain point on the clock.
It's worth nothing. If your vision only works for 90% of the day, you have to build your entire survival strategy around the 10% where it fails.
So the rule is absolute. It's non-negotiable. Above ground is untouchable. On the ground is consumable.
Time tolerated, no middle state. There was no negotiation, no delay.
And this is where the source makes that really profound observation. It says, absolute rules simplify behavior.
And that's the genius of it. By eliminating the possibility of negotiation, of last-minute should I or shouldn't I decision-making, the group saves an immense amount of time, energy, and cognitive load.
They don't have to think about it anymore. The decision is made for them by the rule.
Exactly. They didn't need to defeat the monsters, they just needed to remove themselves from the game entirely during the monster's hour. It's a strategic withdrawal.
Enforced by physics. And the ascent, the act of everyone leaving the ground, it wasn't enforced by a leader shouting a command.
No, it was enforced by the universal recognition of a shared non-negotiable constraint. They were, in effect, outsourcing their decision-making to the laws of physics and time. It's beautiful in a way.
So ascent is mandatory. But as you'd expect, it's not that simple. Their first attempts at roosting, just finding a tree branch, quickly showed that height alone wasn't enough.
Height alone was conditional. Simple tree branches. They fail during bad weather. You have wind, you have rain, you have slick bark. Height isn't enough if it can't offer persistence. Resilience against the elements.
And that brings us to chapter 17 and this critical discovery. The stilts, these weren't things the Gallus built, were they?
No, not at all. They were abandoned infrastructure. The source describes them as structures rising out of the wetlands, old posts driven deep into the mud, with platforms hovering just above what was clearly a historical floodline.
They were built for a memory longer than any single storm.
Exactly. And the Gallus recognized the geometry they offered, not just height, but height with persistence.
And geometry is the key insight here, isn't it? The stilts provide an architectural solution to a biological problem.
This is where that chess analogy you like really clicks into place.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Imagine a game of chess. Your opponent is, I don't know, a queen and two rooks. They're immensely stronger, faster, designed entirely for horizontal pursuit across the board.
Right.
But what if, instead of trying to outplay them, you could just move your pawns off the board entirely and put them on a shelf above the game?
The opponent's ability to attack isn't just reduced.
It's entirely canceled. It's canceled by the change in dimension. Irrelevance is victory without violence. I just love that line from the source.
It's perfect, because the stilts violated ground logic entirely. They simply ignored the geometry of pursuit. Most predators are constrained by bodies designed for friction and horizontal movement.
Teeth and speed and claws are completely useless if you don't have reach.
They're useless. The stilts became insurance against absence itself. The absence of dry ground, the absence of visibility, the absence of certainty.
The geometry just defeats the predator. I mean, a creature that's built for speed on a flat plane, it's going to struggle disproportionately with climbing a slick vertical pole.
The risk-reward calculation flips immediately. The energy cost of climbing 1 meter of that pole far outweighs the potential reward, especially compared to the low cost of pursuing 10 meters on the ground. It's just not worth it.
And then Chapter 18 delivers the ultimate stress test for this new vertical strategy. The flood test.
This is such a powerful section. The water arrives without intent. It's not malicious, it just follows gravity. But in doing so, it immediately punishes any and all ground-based safety strategies.
The flood is basically a perfect natural experiment.
It is. It didn't target the queens, it revealed them. It showed them in the most dramatic way possible and without any prejudice the fundamental limits of relying on the earth.
The water just erases everything. Camouflage becomes useless mud, scraps of food wash away, traction vanishes.
The water essentially chooses sides by punishing anything that requires friction or dry ground.
And you just have to imagine what a powerful moment of confirmation that must have been for them. Sitting up there on the stilts watching all their old strategies, all their old fears, literally wash away without regret.
And the stilts, because they're anchored below that fluctuation line, they just ignored the water. They existed beyond its reach.
And this confirmed a new principle for them, right? That safety measured by what the land offers you is insufficient.
It has to be measured by what the land cannot take away. The stilts were built for that longer memory. They made the Gallus independent of the ground's moods, its cycles.
And this lets us move to the big conceptual conclusion in Chapter 20, defining vertical sovereignty. We have to contrast the old way, the farm's idea of control, with what the stilts offered, which was sovereignty. They're profoundly different states.
Oh, they're completely different. Control requires continuous intervention, constant effort.
Like lights, walls, a managed climate.
Yeah.
They're always having to enforce the boundaries.
Always on watch. Sovereignty, in this context, requires only one thing: position. Height changes the rules without any argument. Those above need not respond at all to the chaos or the pressure happening below.
So instead of having to enforce rules, they just exist in a place where those external pressures lose all relevance. Domain matters more than rule.
That's the core of it. The stilts didn't require vigilance or assertion. They simply achieved a state where intervention from them was completely unnecessary.
That's sovereignty. It's where dependency ends.
Yes. They are subjects only of time, and they have already chosen to obey time by ascending before the deadline. So, in a strange way, obeying what cannot be changed, the physics of light, the law of gravity, the speed of time, that becomes freedom.
They stopped trying to find a universal solution and instead found one that was just sufficient.
Owning the vertical for half of every cycle means owning survival itself.
And that ownership simplifies everything, doesn't it? On the ground, choices branch out endlessly. Do I hide here? Do I run there? Do I forage now?
But above ground, all of that complexity collapses. Choice collapses to presence or absence. Are you on the stilts or are you not?
That's strategic reduction.
Yeah.
It's clarity. And clarity shortens deliberation. It saves time. It saves energy. It's an architectural solution to cognitive fatigue.
But the stilts didn't just offer height, they did something else. They fundamentally changed how the group sensed and interacted with the world. They moved beyond the failed, borrowed senses of sight and sound.
This is Chapter 19, where the wooden platforms start to function as instruments.
Exactly. They become what the source calls a shared nervous system, and they speak a very simple language, the language of difference.
This feels like another massive evolutionary leap. They've gone from relying on complex visual data, which they know fails in the blind hour,
to relying on unambiguous physical data, information transmitted through a solid material. Vibration travels cleanly through that wood, translating any climbing attempt into a simple, undeniable signal.
and it's felt directly through bone contact. The source has that great line, "Wood does not forgive deceit."
It can't. And the key distinction here is about pattern recognition, the purity of the signal.
What do you mean by that?
Well, think about background noise. Wind and rain, they strike the entire platform broadly and evenly. It's a symmetrical, predictable disturbance. The whole structure hums with it.
Okay, so that's the baseline noise.
That's the baseline. But the weight of a climber arrives asymmetrically. It's a sharp tap on one post, then a pause, then another sharp tap on another post. That persistence, that asymmetrical signal, it reveals intent and it reveals mass.
So the platform essentially betrays the climber before the climber can even figure out if it's safe to keep going.
It's a perfect early warning system. And it means the response time expands dramatically. It bypasses all the flaws of sight and sound in low light. They didn't need to shout warnings to each other.
They felt it through their feet, instantly,
Mhm.
across the entire group.
The whole platform, through physical contact, becomes a single distributed sensor array. They just had to learn to filter for that asymmetrical pattern, that thump, pause, thump.
And this passive reception, just being present enough to feel what the structure was telling them, is what allowed their vigilance to finally relax into confidence.
They replaced constant, stressful visual checking with a calm, tactile awareness.
And the result of this total confidence in their position is defined in Chapter 21 as the silence above. And again, like with everything else, this isn't the literal absence of sound. It's something much deeper.
It's the absence of urgency. Urgency is exhausting. Mentally, physically, it just burns you out. And it lives entirely at ground level, where time is thin and the risk is immediate and unpredictable.
Safety then becomes the absence of having to make decisions under pressure.
Precisely. Once they were up on the stilts, the crucial decisions, the big roost or vanish choice, had already been made minutes ago. There was nothing left to decide.
That's a fascinating thought. Pre-decided safety is peace.
Mm-hmm.
The silence is cognitive relief.
Exactly. The farm silence, which we talked about in the last deep dive, that was brittle. It was engineered. It was liable to shatter with the smallest disturbance.
But the stilt's quiet was organic. It was resilient.
Right. Sound could ebb and flow naturally below them without inducing panic. The night ceased to be something they merely endured, their vigilance condensed from frantic, wide-eyed scanning into just a stable posture.
They learned that ignoring a threat that cannot act is a form of discipline that conserves immense amounts of energy.
A profound lesson. And finally, the structure itself, the very architecture of the stilts, enforce a powerful social lesson. This is in chapters 20 and 21. Social equality by geometry. How does a building dictate social structure?
It seems counterintuitive.
But it makes perfect sense when you think about it. The platform enforces equality by constraint. Because the stilts are high and the platforms are relatively narrow, no one can dominate space vertically without losing their balance.
So if one bird gets aggressive and tries to shove another to get a better spot,
It destabilizes itself first, and it potentially destabilizes the whole structure for everyone. The physics of the situation punishes that kind of behavior.
so self-correction precedes conflict. Now, if you want to move, you have to be mutually aware. You have to cooperate just to maintain stability.
Right. And no one can hoard safety. You can't get more safe than someone else on the platform. The structure distributes the risk and the safety evenly. The geometry rendered ambition totally irrelevant.
Hierarchy just dissolves because there's nothing valuable to fight over.
Nothing to contest. No one could claim higher status on a plane where everyone was equally unreachable from the threat below. Cooperation emerges not as some high-minded moral imperative,
It emerges as the easiest, most efficient path, the path of least resistance.
enforced by the physics of the platform itself.
Okay, so the night is managed. The system is in place. But the cycle only works if it closes cleanly. We have to turn to the morning side of this temporal mastery, the law of return. This is chapter 22.
The dawn gate.
Exactly. The safety they achieved at night redefined the strict terms of their entry back into the day.
And they had to learn to read dawn with the same lethal seriousness that they read dusk. The mandate is just as absolute. Descend only when color returned and depth stopped lying.
So partial light, even if it seemed bright and warm and promising.
Was still the blind hour wearing a gentler mask. It was a subtle danger, but a persistent one.
They realized that the dangers of the ecotone didn't just vanish at sunrise. They receded, slowly. Rushing the descent would invite the exact same miscalculations that caused those first losses at dusk.
Correct. And the descent itself was managed. It was staggered, not simultaneous.
Why is that important?
Because congestion creates error. A panicked rush down to the ground is just as dangerous as a panicked rush up to the roost. A slow, deliberate return restored balance and efficiency. The source describes the feeling as a held breath, finally released.
But, and this is crucial, they didn't turn the stilts into a permanent fortress. They didn't just stay up there forever.
No, and that's key. They understood that to abandon the ground entirely would be to abandon adaptation itself. The stilts offered reprieve, a sanctuary, but the ground still offered yield, food, materials. It required disciplined contact.
And this smooth, deliberate temporal rhythm, this in and out, allowed them to perfect their daytime efficiency through an incredible adjustment, which is detailed in chapter 23. It's an anatomical and cognitive change. Partitioned attention, the split eye.
This is the mind itself adjusting to the final bottleneck, and that bottleneck is attention management.
And the source material confirms this isn't just a metaphor. This is an organized lateralization of brain function. They stopped trying to see the entire world all at once.
And they allowed their brains to specialize based on the twin demands of survival and productivity.
Okay, so let's break down the two distinct jobs of the split eye. First, the left eye. It scans the periphery. It's looking for novelty, for danger. It's wide angle and controlled by the right hemisphere of the brain. What's its core function?
Its function is to flag, but not to analyze. That's the key. Its only question is this new?
So it's a high-level surveillance system.
A very high-level system that sustains vigilance longer than sheer terror ever could. It's the early warning system that operates without commitment. It registers the data, a flicker of movement, a strange shadow, but it doesn't halt the entire operation.
Okay, and then you have the right eye. It's controlled by the left hemisphere, and it's focused downward. It's narrow. It's precise. This eye is liberated from the burden of immediate threat assessment. So what does it do?
It focuses on value, on repetition. Its question is this useful? It counts seeds. It tracks the path of an insect. It measures the short-range distance needed for a safe hop to the next patch of ground.
Because the safety job is partitioned to the left eye and the right brain. The right eye is freed from fear.
It becomes calmer, sharper, and incredibly accurate in its yield assessment. It's the specialist, the counter of returns.
This is where their cognitive efficiency just explodes, isn't it? And this is such a powerful solution for us to think about. The critical function of this lateralization is that it prevents mental paralysis.
Exactly. If the Gallus were forced to evaluate threat and opportunity simultaneously with the same visual input, the same part of the brain, they would hesitate, they'd freeze, they'd waste precious time and energy.
But a mind that's allowed to alternate, to partition the tasks.
It does not hesitate. The group effectively becomes a single sensor array that's wider than the clearing itself.
So when novelty appears, that shadow, that sudden movement, the left eyes of the group flag it. And this causes a subtle, collective shift in posture. Everyone sort of tenses up.
A ripple of awareness. But because the right eye is shielded from that immediate jolt of panic, it can continue its work. It can continue counting or tracking uninterrupted.
The result is sustained productivity without sacrificing safety. They converted potential surprise into early data. They moved from a nervous system of pure reaction to one of optimization.
They didn't need to be brave. They just needed to be partitioned. Their movement on the ground became this quiet, complementary choreography.
And once that attention was divided correctly, nothing in their world could demand all of it at once, ever again.
They found that capacity preserved is reserve, and reserve is survival. This complex cognitive strategy was simply the final internal architecture they needed to support the external architecture of time they had already built.
What an incredible journey of strategic transformation. I mean, to summarize the entire shift we've just covered in this deep dive, the Gallus moved from Earth-level camouflage, which is a spatial solution, right, fitting in,
Right.
to absolute safety through elevation and rigid timing, a complete temporal solution. They achieved sovereignty not by conquering the world, but by fitting into its constraints so precisely that the world stopped pressing on them where it hurt the most.
And the long-term impact of that is just profound because the system survived by seeking repeatability, not permanence.
That's a great
The
distinctivity.
solutions they found, the stilts, the timing, the partitioned attention, they didn't require constant new innovation or brute force. They drew from what was already there. Geometry, physics, the behavior of light.
So safety was ultimately found in knowing when not to engage.
When to step up vertically and when to step back from the edge of the clock. It's a discipline of refusal.
And that quiet realization, that refusal to be rushed or to be fully consumed by the demands of the moment, that feels like the final piece of mastery. We'll leave you with a provocative thought that's posed in the source material. Something for you to explore in your own approach to work or life. What would change if you stopped trying to win against time and instead learned exactly where to stand while it moves past you?
The queens never answered that question in words. They answered it by simply being there tomorrow.
On time. Above the ground. Still. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've spent weeks tracing this really extraordinary story of the Gallus movement. You know, the Queen Cinnamons who broke free from that industrialized system, the farm.
That human-built system, yeah.
Exactly. We covered their escape, their first principles of survival, using dirt for cover, height for safety.
Physical stuff.
Right. But today, we're concluding this journey. We're moving beyond that physical survival and I guess into a realm of something more like philosophical mastery.
It really is the critical pivot point of the whole source. If the first half was about, where to stand,
Yeah.
this final phase, which the source is called coherence, it's all about how to stand and crucially, when to move.
And the challenge they solved wasn't just securing a piece of land.
No, not at all. It was about securing their time.
Exactly. So our mission today is to really unpack this final, most elegant phase. The core shift, like you said, is that their idea of sovereignty, it's ultimately measured in time, not in territory.
Right. They figured out that the ultimate defense wasn't about being stronger or conquering anything.
No.
It was something much, much subtler. It was about achieving, irrelevance.
Irrelevance. That's such a powerful word here. They became so perfectly synchronized, so, aligned with the deep rhythms of those Ashley County clearings. That all the external pressures, even that constant threat from the monsters, it just sort of stopped intersecting with their reality.
Yeah, it's like they were operating on a different plane.
Yeah.
And to really get a picture of this final state, The sources kind of hint at this great analogy.
The symphony.
The symphony, exactly. Imagine a perfect symphony performing. It's beautiful, it's continuous, it's timed flawlessly.
But there's no conductor.
No conductor. That's the key. The 142 Queen Cinnamons, this is a small nation.
Yeah.
They didn't rely on a central command, which is exactly what doomed the farm's brittle top-down structure.
So they got to this state of perfect synchronization not because someone was giving orders, but because they were all listening to the same internal rhythms and to the environment around them all at the same time.
And this is where it gets really mind-blowing. If one bird makes a small mistake, a misstep, a false alarm,
A wrong note in the symphony.
a wrong note, perfect.
Yeah.
The others don't stop and panic. They just use their own precise timing to adjust, to absorb that little bit of dissonance.
And the music it continues. The song of survival carries on without any panic.
That collective, continuous, nonverbal adjustment.
Yeah.
Where the whole system is just so much greater than the sum of its parts and can absorb individual failure.
That's coherence.
That is the achievement of coherence.
Right.
We're talking about a living system that is, dynamically optimizing itself moment by moment.
Okay, so let's start where they did. At the smallest unit, the individual mind.
Right.
Chapter 23 goes into this biological reality that becomes their core survival strategy, the split eye. And this isn't just like a metaphor for balanced thinking.
No, it's a literal cognitive design.
A design meant to prevent maybe the greatest internal threat to survival, which is paralysis. What was the danger this partitioning solved for them?
The enemy of the individual Queen Cinnamon wasn't, the claw of the monster, not really. It was hesitation.
Hesitation.
The sources are so clear about this. Survival in that place operates on these razor-thin time margins. And they had this great line, certainty is fatal when time is thin.
Wow.
So think about it. If your brain has to use one single central processor to evaluate two opposing things at the same time.
Like, is that shadow a threat versus is this seed worth digging for?
Exactly. That simultaneous evaluation, it creates a bottleneck. And the decision-making process just freezes, even if it's just for a fraction of a second.
And that microsecond is all a predator needs.
That's all it takes. So the Gallus cognitive structure, it solved this bottleneck by dividing the labor. It's a literal anatomical solution for partitioning attention under pressure.
So that vigilance, the need for safety, never silences the need for sustenance, for food.
And vice versa. They can do both at once without conflict.
That's incredible. So this partitioning is highly specialized, right? It's divided across the brain's hemispheres.
Extremely specialized. Let's look at the left eye first. That's in chapter 24. It's all about vigilance and novelty.
Okay, and it's controlled by the right hemisphere of the brain, which usually handles things like spatial reasoning, the big picture. What does that tell us about its mission?
Its mission is beautifully simple. It scans outward, wide, and alert. And it's tuned to the periphery.
The edges.
The edges, yeah. It's looking for anything that violates the expected pattern, the background noise of the clearing.
Okay.
And here's the really profound insight, the thing that completely separates it from the farm's anxiety-driven surveillance. It's the question it asks.
It's not, is this dangerous?
No. It asks, is this new?
Wait, I really want to unpack that. Why is novelty a better question? I mean, if it sees a monster, surely it needs to register danger right away.
Well, you'd think so. But if the eye registers danger first, it triggers a generalized fear response.
Panic?
Right. Panic, hesitation, wasted energy. But if it registers novelty, it just flags the signal. And that demands only a minimal, very precise response orientation.
The little head tilt?
The slight head tilt, the minimal adjustment in posture, which the sources, they document it so meticulously. The whole system is designed to trigger orientation, not panic.
So it's the difference between like a level 1, hey, look at this alert, versus a level 5, everybody run, panic.
You've got it. It's an information filter. It's filtering noise.
And it learns to ignore the normal stuff.
Precisely. It learns to ignore the familiar, predictable movements, the wind in the leaves, the sway of branches, other animals that are not a threat.
Okay.
It just holds the context of the environment constant, and it waits for a violation of that pattern.
And this vigilance, it's not just one bird's job.
No. And this is critical. It's a social resource.
I found that part so fascinating. The social rotation of vigilance. It stops any one individual from burning out.
It has to. I mean, we often think of constant vigilance as like a personal discipline or something.
Right, a moral virtue.
Yeah. But for the queens, it's a collective task. Because vigilance is metabolically expensive.
It costs energy.
A lot of energy. The sources say that a single bird trying to maintain 100% focus all the time would just exhaust itself. It would degrade its own decision-making and become the weak link in the chain.
So because the 142 are integrated, this costly burden gets passed around?
It shifts and rotates. The flock makes sure that the aggregate vigilance is always high, even if no single bird is maxing out its effort at any given moment.
And there's that incredible psychological observation in the text, that their vigilance is sustained longer by respect for the predator's skill than by sheer terror.
That's such a key point. Terror is biologically corrosive.
It burns you out.
It leads to adrenaline dumps, fatigue, and that generalized inefficient panic we were talking about. Respect, on the other hand, is just attentive.
It's calm.
It's a calm, measured acknowledgement of the threat's capability. And that results in very specific, calibrated behavior, like keeping that left eye scanning the periphery.
So it's the difference between running around blindly screaming and, I don't know, a chess player calmly watching the whole board.
That's a great way to put it. This grounding in respect rather than fear is what makes their responses so clean and effective.
Okay, so that's the left eye. Let's flip to the other side of the coin. The right eye, in chapter 25. This one is all about precision and value.
This is the utilitarian side, the left hemisphere's domain. It's all about narrow, precise focus.
Okay.
Its entire role is to manage the economics of survival. It focuses downward, it looks for detail, and it's tuned for repeatability.
So the left eye handles the future, the potential threat. The right eye is managing the present, the immediate gain.
Perfectly said.
And its question is completely self-contained. Is this worth taking?
Yep. And this is where all the efficiency is optimized.
It's like a tiny accountant.
It's a micro-accounting exercise, constantly. Counting scraps, measuring the effort versus the caloric return, and this is critical optimizing every movement.
So the right eye is what tells them to stop scratching in a spot that isn't yielding anything.
Or to shorten a path by a few inches. It's the engine of their sustained productivity.
But I wonder, isn't there a friction point here? You've got the left eye, which is all about novelty and looking for change, and the right eye, which is about routine and repeatability.
Right.
What stops the constant, urgent need for food from just overriding the need for vigilance, or the other way around?
Ah, that's the genius of the partitioning. The mind solved that problem by making sure the signals don't get mixed up at that critical decision point.
How does that work?
A flash in the periphery, that's the left eye. It only demands orientation. It doesn't automatically trigger the right eye to drop the seed that was just about to eat.
Oh, I see.
The vigilance system delivers this kind of low-level, continuous signal that just says, hey, stay alert. Meanwhile, the right eye can operate completely unbothered by that generalized anxiety.
So the right eye only stops what it's doing when the left eye signal goes from, hey, look, to, hey, confirmed threat, time to go.
Exactly. The system is designed to favor sustained productivity unless it's absolutely necessary to flee. It doesn't default to panic first.
And the right eye also governs restraint, which seems so counterintuitive for an animal under pressure to eat.
Restraint is absolutely crucial for sustainability. And this is where that rotational vigilance from the left eye actually helps the right eye do its job.
Oh, so...
Well, if the queens were panicky, they'd just gorge. They'd take everything right now and create scarcity for tomorrow.
Right.
The right eye makes sure they leave enough to sustain the yield. That's a core concept for, like, regenerative foraging. And it also helps them avoid hotspots that might attract predators.
So a calm right eye, one that isn't being constantly interrupted by panic signals, leads to a higher return on investment.
Precisely. Because the fear is compartmentalized. The partitioned mind protects the measurement tool, the right eye, from the anxiety signal of the left.
So let's synthesize this. The partitioning of attention lets the queens achieve this sustained productivity without sacrificing safety. They eliminate that agonizing choice that so many creatures face. Look up for danger or look down for food.
They do both.
Continuously, in a staggered, distributed, and this is the key, a sustainable way.
You know, the farm offered productivity, but it was at the expense of safety. It demanded this frantic, generalized attention.
Yeah.
The Gallus did the opposite. They established safety as a prerequisite for productivity by making sure those two jobs, vigilance and sustenance, were handled by independent yet overlapping channels.
This cognitive structure, It's the foundation for everything that comes next.
It is the bedrock of their coherence.
Okay, so if the split eye is preventing paralysis at the individual micro level, we have to look at how that scales up.
To the macro level, the whole collective.
We're moving from the individual mind to the collective mind, operating as like a single nervous system.
Right. This is the transition from the farm's really brittle reliance on aggregation.
Which is just what? A bunch of bodies in one place.
A bunch of identical bodies getting one single top-down instruction. That's aggregation. This is about moving to the clearing's powerful decentralized integration.
And Chapter 26 describes the whole group, all 142 of them, operating as a sensor array.
A collective consciousness. And the source is clear. This isn't spiritual or mystical.
Yeah.
It's a triumph of nonverbal decentralized information processing.
So how does that signal actually propagate? Without a leader shouting commands, what are the mechanics?
It's all incredibly subtle, and it's all nonverbal. The signals don't spread by sound, which would just amplify noise and attract predators.
Right.
They spread through posture and staggered pauses.
Okay, break that down.
So when one bird's left eye detects novelty, that orientation signal, that tiny shift in weight, the head tilt, it acts as a little disturbance in the flock's rhythm.
A perturbation.
Yeah, and that signal spreads through what the sources call ripples of stillness.
Ripples of stillness. I mean, that's such a powerful image.
It is.
It's not a ripple of panic, it's a ripple of nothing. A temporary absence of motion.
Precisely. If one bird detects a potential threat, the birds nearby register that subtle posture change, and they momentarily pause or adjust their own feeding rhythm.
And that ripple spreads outward.
It spreads, confirming the novelty signal. But here's the crucial part. Those ripples have to dissolve smoothly.
What does that mean?
It means there's no echo. There's no sustained amplification of panic. If that threat isn't confirmed by a second or a third bird,
The ripple just fades away.
the rhythm smoothly resumes. The whole system is designed to absorb noise, not multiply it.
This speaks directly to the idea of distributed awareness. The farm was so fragile because of its centralized supervision.
Right. One gate fails, one light snaps, and the whole system collapses catastrophically.
So how does the structure of the 142 protect them from that kind of system-wide failure?
It operates on massive redundancy and what the sources call a statistical instrument approach.
Okay.
In clearing, many eyes watch for few things.
Which is the total inverse of the farm, where a few supervisors were trying to watch for everything.
Exactly. And that means individual errors in the clearing. A bird gets startled by a falling leaf or misreads a signal. Those errors dampen rather than amplify
How does that work?
because of the collective timing. If one bird flies up prematurely, the others just assess the situation. They find no confirming signal from anyone else, and they stay steady. The system self-corrects.
So local failure is survivable.
Entirely survivable. The sources are explicit about this. The collective pattern just continues, unbroken.
It sounds like the system prioritizes the health of the overall pattern over the correctness of any single member's decision,
Absolutely. The collective behavior corrects the individual's mistake.
which is the complete opposite of the farm.
At the farm, the leader's mistake immediately became catastrophic system failure for every single individual. Here, influence follows accurate information, not, seniority or status.
I want to spend a little more time on how this coherence changes the predator's experience. If the group is acting like a statistical instrument, what does that feel like for a hunter who relies on clear targets?
It feels like hunting fog. They encounter two things that are just kryptonite to a hunter: delay and ambiguity.
Delay and ambiguity.
Predators thrive on certainty. They need a clean vector, a clear line of sight to a single fleeing target, a predictable trajectory.
But when they approach the clearing,
That opportunity just evaporates.
Yeah.
The flock denies them access to clarity. They don't see 142 individual targets.
what do they see?
They see a statistical field, a field where the density is always changing, the edges are softening, and the movement is contradictory. It's flowing, but there's no predictable urgency.
So the queens are essentially creating high decision costs for the predator.
That's a great way to put it. The predator has to waste energy just waiting for a moment of clarity that never, ever arrives.
And the delay itself is the weapon.
Exactly. If the flock refuses to commit to a panic reaction, the predator, who is also operating on a limited energy budget, can't commit to the chase.
So they use their collective behavior to neutralize the predator's main advantages, which are speed and certainty.
They become, moment by moment, just not worth the energy it would take to hunt them.
And this incredible structural achievement leads to that profound definition of nationhood in Chapter 26. The sources say the group became a nation, but without any of the things we normally associate with that.
It's the most radical political statement in the whole book, I think.
Yeah.
The nation emerged not through any external markers. There are no borders drawn in the dirt, no flags, no sworn oaths.
So what was it?
It was shared perception and shared timing. That's it.
Alignment just emerges because it's the most efficient way to survive.
It's efficient, not enforced. There's no military, no legal code.
So efficiency is the law and coherence is the Constitution.
You could absolutely say that. And trust. Trust accrues not to the loudest voice or the strongest bird, but to accuracy.
So if a particular bird consistently gives a reliable posture signal,
The others learn to follow that signal, regardless of that bird's status.
and that creates a system that just inherently resists centralized failure.
Because there is no center to disable. It's a government by pattern, where the collective intelligence always flows toward the best available information, rather than being routed through a single, slow, or, fallible authority.
A self-healing, self-optimizing, decentralized nation. It's not just aggregated anymore.
It's truly integrated.
All right, so now let's shift our focus from the social organism back to the physical world, but with this new understanding of their relationship to it.
Okay.
The land itself stops being just a static background and becomes an active, reciprocal partner. Chapter 27 talks about how the clearing learns back the queen's rhythm. What does that actually mean in physical terms?
It means the land holds a memory. It responds to consistent, intentional use. The queens are no longer trying to force the land to conform to their needs, which was that brutal, extractive relationship they had at the farm. Instead, they adjust to the land's temperament. They learn the iron clay, the wet spots, the best places for drainage, and in return, the land adapts to their consistent, predictable rhythm.
Can you give us some specific examples of this mutual adaptation from the text?
Yeah, there's clear physical evidence. Paths emerge, but not because they cleared them.
But just from repeated use.
From preferred, repeated footing. Because they always step in the places that offer the most solid purchase, the ground subtly compacts there. And that creates these reliable routes that reduce friction and surprise for the whole flock.
What else?
The dust baths. They deepen, and their internal drainage structure actually improves because of the constant specific disturbance delivered with perfect predictability.
So the land is sort of preparing itself for their movements?
Exactly. It amplifies stability for the flock. It's an amazing feedback loop.
This sounds almost like a form of biomimicry, where their pattern aligns so seamlessly with the natural geology that the amount of effort required just to move around decreases over time.
It's the ultimate low-energy strategy, and this leads to that really critical philosophical distinction the sources make about territory.
Okay.
They conclude that this relationship is not ownership, it's belonging.
Ownership in our terms usually implies defense, right? Exclusion, drawing boundaries. Why did the Gallus reject that model?
Because ownership invites defense, and defense inherently provokes conflict and challenge.
If they owned the clearing, they'd have to spend all their time and energy defending it.
They'd spend their entire strategic reserve defending borders against every possible intruder, human or monster.
So they achieve belonging instead, which is a deeper state of integration.
Yes, legitimacy emerges when their very presence improves the clearing's own coherence rather than disrupting it. They aren't ruling the territory, they are woven into its natural efficient cycles.
So the land basically finds their predictable rhythm useful, and so it stops arguing with them.
That is a powerful idea for anyone managing any kind of resource, isn't it? That integration is just so much more sustainable than brute control.
It creates a symbiotic safety net.
If their rhythm improves the stability of the ecosystem, then the ecosystem is incentivized to maintain their presence.
And this theme of precise, predictable rhythm, it's best captured by what the sources call the hour they own.
The seam of time, chapter 28.
So what defines this narrow, critical window of time?
It's that transitional ground at dawn. It's defined very specifically by time. It's after the color in the sky stabilizes and the ambient light is optimal for the right eye's function.
Okay.
But before the external pressures of the world really take hold, rising heat, more scavengers, the predators reorganizing for the day.
It's the honest ground.
The honest ground, yes, because the light is clear and the conditions are settled and dependable.
So why is that specific gradient, that seam of time, so strategically advantageous? Why not just start foraging the moment the sun comes up?
Pure metabolic efficiency. 2 reasons. First, the predators, the monsters who hunt in low light, they are fatigued.
They've been hunting all night.
Their asymmetrical advantage is gone. And second, the queens. who have rested fully up on the stilts, above the ground.
They enter the clearing with a massive energy advantage.
It's a huge energy advantage, and, more importantly, with early calm.
That early calm, that seems to be the key to everything.
It's a force multiplier. Because they aren't rushed, their right eyes can measure and count without the anxiety that distorts judgment.
So they maximize their yield when the ground is most forgiving and the light is perfect.
This early efficiency, this calm productivity, it pays interest throughout the entire day. By claiming the best hour, they prevent the desperation that leads to mistakes and high-risk foraging later in the afternoon.
They operate from a surplus, not a deficit.
Always from a surplus.
And their ownership of this hour, it isn't claimed through fighting.
No, not at all. It's claimed by reliability, just by showing up at exactly the right moment every single day.
And that consistency makes that time slot unsuitable for intrusion.
Exactly. Predators learn through repeated negative reinforcement that the energy they'd have to spend to contest that hour is just too high for the payoff, which is zero.
So their punctuality is their invisible fence.
A time boundary that requires no physical defense whatsoever.
Okay, so if the dawn hour is about precise activity, the midday hours are defined by the opposite, by precise inactivity.
Yes.
Chapter 29 introduces strategic stillness. This is the discipline of refusal. You mentioned that at the farm, constant movement was a virtue.
It was demanded.
Why does movement become so prohibitively expensive for them in the middle of the day?
It's a collision of two things. It's the law of diminishing returns meeting increasing risk.
Okay.
The sun is high, so it's hot, which raises their metabolic costs.
Mm-hmm.
The noise from everything else is high. And critically, the food scraps are hardening, or they're sinking into the dry dirt, or they're just gone.
So any movement now costs a lot of energy for very little caloric return.
Plus, you have the increased risk of exposure in that high, flat light where there are no shadows.
So the discipline is the absolute refusal to chase those diminishing returns. The farm punished stillness as inefficient, but the Gallus completely flipped that law.
They did. For them, stillness is not just resting. It's accumulating a strategic reserve.
A reserve energy?
Of energy, and just as importantly, of attention.
Okay.
By refusing to move during that low-yield hour, they preserve their capacity for later, for when the yield is better, or the danger is higher, or for some unexpected event.
And this reserve prevents that emotional exhaustion that leads to bad, high-risk decisions.
Exactly.
And what effect does this stillness have on predators, on external threats?
It makes the queens unreadable.
Unreadable.
Predators hunt for movement cues. They look for the trajectory of flight or the sustained focus of foraging, but ambiguous behavior.
A flock that is neither eating nor running away, but just being.
Exactly. That deters hunters who rely on clear, committed vectors for successful attack. It teaches the predator, over time, that this target is not a reliable source of quick energy.
So they communicate safety through inaction.
It's fascinating, isn't it? The source materials note that constant readiness, always being on edge, it actually corrodes judgment.
And they replace it with selective readiness.
Still from that reserve.
But what about the mental cost? I mean, for humans, being forced to be still is really difficult. We get anxious.
The sources suggest that because their primary vigilance, that left eye, is rotational and non-panicked, their stillness is not an anxious freeze.
It's a calm conservation strategy.
They're optimizing the day as a whole, not trying to maximize a gain in any single moment. This temporal discipline removes anxiety because they trust the future. They trust that they have the reserve to handle whatever comes.
Then as the day goes on, they start moving again, but it's a different kind of movement. It's not foraging, it's not flight. Chapter 31 calls it unstructured movement.
The walk without urgency.
If it's not about finding food, what is its function?
The function is purely to tune the system and to integrate themselves even further into their environment. It's like exercise without effort.
So it keeps their joints supple, maintains readiness.
And it absorbs all the small, unpredictable environmental uncertainties that a rigid plan could never account for.
I get the physical benefit, but why is this kind of movement strategically important?
It's preventative maintenance for the whole system, including the environment. It subtly redistributes their pressure across the clearing so they don't wear out any single patch of ground.
I see.
And the movement itself is a form of sensory input. The sources suggest this movement is so integrated, so automatic, that it actually bypasses conscious thought.
Which softens their behavior.
Yes, there's that great line, thought slows walking.
I love that.
It's true. When movement becomes automatic and environmental, just flowing lightly through suggested paths, it reduces decision fatigue. The body is absorbing all these environmental cues, the language of the soil, its texture, the subtle changes in slopes, without needing to interrupt the conscious mind.
So it maintains that state of coherence without high cognitive overhead.
Exactly.
And finally, we get to the moment that used to be the most terrifying time at the farm dusk.
Chapter 32.
Now, though, we see dusk without drama. What does that mastery look like?
It is the ultimate measure of their system's completion. The calm, planned ascent to the stilts is just this brutal contrast with the farm's dramatized high-stress transitions.
The chaotic bells, the snapping lights.
The force movement designed to trigger fear-based compliance, yes. For the queens, the urgency is just gone. It's been removed entirely.
Why?
Because the outcome is decided. It was decided hours earlier, during the hour they own, and during their midday stillness.
So the system is whole. There's nothing left unfinished on the ground.
Exactly. The ascent to the stilts is smooth, it's timed, it's methodical. Dusk is simply a signal to change elevation. It's not a crisis point anymore.
And the powerful conclusion there is that when a system's most dangerous, high-stakes transition from active day to vulnerable night no longer produces drama.
Only continuity remains. They have mastered the cycle so completely that the edge of the world just doesn't create anxiety anymore.
That elimination of drama from critical transitions, that is the clearest sign that they've moved beyond just survival.
And into true sovereignty.
Which brings us to the final conceptual layer. This is detailed in Chapter 33 in the epilogue. It's the definition of success that sustains this rhythm. Chapter 33 defines their success not by anything physical, but by their sovereignty in time.
The source material offers this really radical redefinition of what a civilization is. It says it explicitly. A civilization isn't measured in territory or military strength or accumulated wealth.
It's measured in its refusal to be rushed.
And its capacity for continuity without exhaustion.
Yeah.
They just shifted the entire metric from maximum speed to maximum duration.
And that reliance on duration, it hinges completely on what the source is called the reserve.
The reserve is the capacity unused. Their survival relies on maintaining a buffer. The queens never, ever operate at 100% capacity.
And this reserve is built minute by minute.
From the efficient foraging in the morning, the strategic stillness at midday, the early return to the stilts. This unused capacity is the wellspring of their calmness.
It seems so counterintuitive, though, especially in a resource-scarce environment.
Right.
We're taught to maximize our output in every single moment.
We are.
So why is this reserve so vital to their continued survival?
Because it prevents panic. It allows for a measured, appropriate response when real novelty arrives.
Okay.
If they're always operating at 99% capacity, any unexpected stimulus, a sudden storm, a new kind of predator, would send them spiraling into deficit and panic.
But by maintaining, say, a 20 or 30% reserve,
They can absorb that shock without exhausting the system. It is the absolute antithesis of the modern mandate for total efficiency.
because total efficiency leaves no room for error,
And error is inevitable in any living system.
that makes their stillness a strategic weapon in itself. Now, let's talk about how they achieved lasting safety if they're not fighting. The final mechanism is irrelevance as defense.
They neutralized the threat entirely. They realized that defeating the monsters was, well, it was impossible, but it was also unnecessary.
So instead, they just focused on ceasing to be prey.
They made themselves irrelevant to the threat. And how did they do that? They exited the schedules?
They exited the monster's hunting schedule, the flood schedule.
And most importantly, the farm schedule of human demand.
And they occupied that vertical layer, the stilts, that the predators physically could not reach. The geometry of the stilts neutralized the speed of the claw.
Irrelevance is victory without violence. A predator will not waste metabolic energy on a target that consistently delivers a 0% return.
So by being consistently unavailable and predictable only in their unavailability during the danger periods,
They trained the entire environment to just ignore them. The threat didn't disappear, but the threat vector no longer intersected with their existence.
and the final mark of this success, as it's noted in the epilogue, is that this system survives by leaving no scar.
This is the huge distinction between dominance and endurance. Dominance always leaves scars. Walls, waste, exhausted defenses, exhausted participants.
The Gallus system is a rhythm.
You can't seize a rhythm, you can't copy it, you can't dismantle it because it's not a fixed thing. It is a repeatable pattern.
If you tried to occupy their space later, you might not even know they were there.
That quiet persistence, it outlasts permanence every time.
So if the farm was defined by its monuments, its concrete boundaries, The Gallus nation is defined by its subtlety, by its absence of physical defenses.
Their sovereignty is temporal and behavioral. They exist in the gaps in the scenes of the world's schedule. It requires immense discipline, but zero conflict.
And that leads us directly to the book's final, very provocative insight, one that challenges our fundamental assumptions about action and struggle.
The book concludes with this profound question. It's for the reader and, for you, the listener, today. We spend so much of our lives trying to win against time, fighting urgency, rushing, chasing. But the Gallus achieved survival by stopping that fight completely.
And the question is,
What would change if you stopped trying to win against time, if you stopped fighting urgency, and instead learned exactly where to stand while it moves past you?
that question it makes you immediately reevaluate your own schedule, your own bottlenecks. Are we operating under the illusion that speed equals safety?
When the Gallus demonstrated that alignment equals safety, and alignment so often requires stillness, not speed.
So this whole deep dive into the sovereign rhythm of the Queen's cinnamons, it really reveals a critical shift. The farm sought safety through aggressive control, through maximal output.
Which led to a brittle, unsustainable system.
And the Gallus, they achieved freedom through precise alignment, disciplined refusal, that strategic art of not moving and cultivating that all-important unused capacity.
It's a system built not on what they did aggressively, but on what they learned not to do.
Yeah.
And the impeccable timing of when to stop doing it.
The mastery of time is achieved by respecting its gradients.
Claiming the hour they own, honoring the stillness of midday, and ensuring that smooth transition of dusk.
We hope this journey through their coherence helps you notice the seams in your own schedule, where your own attention is being partitioned between your necessary vigilance and your necessary sustenance.
And maybe where you might need to insert a little bit of that strategic stillness.
Consider where you can build your own strategic reserve, that capacity unused.
And ask yourself if the urgency you feel every day is real, or if it's just the echo of a failed centralized system that's demanding maximum output.
The Queens never answered the great questions of life or nationhood with, grand speeches or declarations.
No.
They answered them with a quiet, daily act.
By being there tomorrow, on time, above the ground, still.